All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited that you are here with us. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is being recorded just so we can share it publicly and anyone can go back and look at this and get any questions answered. You should have access to a Q&A feature if you click towards the bottom of your screen where you can type in questions in real time and we'll be able to respond to them. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end where you can come off of mute and be able to share any questions, ask any clarifications here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Ben Mackey. I'm the Chief of Research Evaluation and Design here in DeSoto ISD. And we also have Josh Newton here, who is our Senior Data Strategist. And the purpose of this conversation is to talk to you all about a program here in DeSoto ISD that we were approved for this year called the Teacher Incentive Allotment. What this program will do, we'll be able to make teachers who are eligible for it, and all of you are here because based on the numbers and the students in your class and the classes that you teach, we believe that you will be eligible for this. And it's a way to potentially earn a substantial amount of extra money directly to your paycheck from the state based on a couple components from your T-TESS evaluation to also how the students in your class grow and the student perception survey. So that's what we're going to talk about. What does it look like? How do you get scored, et cetera? So Josh, if you can move us to the next slide. Here are the big things we're going to cover here. First, what is it? What is the Teacher Incentive Allotment? How do you qualify? Why are you here? How will your designation be determined? How will any points be calculated? And then we'll just give you a timeline and answer any questions. So let's jump in. What is the Teacher Incentive Allotment? A few years back, when the state passed House Bill 3, they passed something called the Teacher Incentive Allotment. And this is a statewide program that will provide schools with additional funding that they can use to supplement the pay of their strongest teachers as measured by student performance. This summer, DeSoto ISD received approval from T.I.A. to be able to offer this program. And then teachers in eligible teaching assignments. And what I mean by that, and we'll dig into it more shortly, but those who teach core subjects, certain core subjects, are going to be eligible this first year. And then based on the performance and how many points teachers earn from that, along with the demographics of the schools that they teach in, and that's measured by T.I.A., teachers are going to be eligible for a lump sum of up to 90% of the funds that are given to the district for that. And so you will have a chance to earn up to 90% of the funds directly into your paycheck, starting based on the data this year to be paid out in next year and beyond. So we can go to the next slide. TEA, Texas Education Agency, has 3 different levels of designation, is what they're calling. And they are recognized, exemplary, and master teachers. So based on these, you can earn if you get this designation as a teacher in DeSoto ISD, you can earn for recognized between $2,700 and $8,100 additional on top of your regular salary. For exemplary, it would be between $5,400 and $16,200. And if you are designated a master teacher, you would be eligible to earn between $10,800 up to $28,800 extra. So the exact amount, though, is not something we get to choose. It is based on the demographics of the district and whether our district is a rural district, which it's not. So it's unlikely that teachers in our system will be able to earn the very highest amount here, but they will be eligible to earn the highest amount that TEA has designated for DeSoto ISD. The allotment varies by campus. The demographics and socioeconomic groups of students on our campuses is different, and it changes every year. It is based on a calculation done by TEA. They will look at the demographics of all of our schools and say, based on the socioeconomic status and the concentration of students from impoverished backgrounds at this school, this is how much teachers are eligible to make. That's a simplified calculation, but just an example of it. And TEA does that every single year. If you earn this designation, you are eligible and you keep it for 5 years. So it actually goes on your TEA teaching certificate. It shows up online in the database that you are a recognized exemplary or master teacher. And if you stay in DeSoto ISD, you are eligible to receive that money every single year for those 5 years. We can go to the next slide. So to zoom out to DeSoto ISD and how your compensation works, every single teacher in the system gets paid their base salary. That is in the board adopted, board approved salary schedule. It's provided to all teaching staff, and based on your number of years of experience and your steps every year, you earn between $52,000 and $65,218. That is your base salary. On top of that, starting this year, and teachers, and we're finishing up the calculation for this, but starting this year and going forward into the future, teachers are eligible to receive up to $10,000 as a retention and recruitment stipend based on your prior years of student outcomes. So if you taught STAAR classes in the past, based on the amount of growth that you're able to deliver with your students, you are going to be eligible for up to $10,000 starting this year. And so we'll be contacting those once those numbers are finished being calculated in the next couple of weeks. And that payout will take place in December and again in June. And that's for this year and into the future. What we're talking about here today, though, is this final piece over here, the teacher incentive allotment. And so this is what we'll talk through about how do you qualify. Again, it's not going to take away anything from your base salary or for your retention and recruitment stipend or any of the other stipends you make. A lot of people on this call have other stipends for coaching or high needs. All of that's the same. This is in addition to. So depending on how you would score in this, you would be eligible for between 0 if you didn't qualify based on the scores, up to the 28,800, although that's asterisk because that's calculated by T.I.A, and they tell us what the most is based on the demographics of the school. So it is feasible that our future compensation goes, instead of being the 52 to 65 that we currently have, there is the pathway for teachers to earn upwards of $100,000, though if TEA's calculations change year to year, that may not be happening, but it will be substantially more than the $65,218 that we are currently at. We can go to the next slide. So Josh is going to take this over, and he's going to talk to you about how do you qualify, what makes you eligible in this system this year.
So good afternoon. So we just want to go through quickly what are the rules that T.I.A and our system have for teachers qualifying to get a designation. So the first three are things around requirements that a teacher has to meet. And a lot of that is how you're coded in the number of teachers that you teach, the number of students that you teach. So in order to be eligible for a distinction through T.I.A, you do have to be coded as a teacher in our student information system, which is TEAMS. You have to receive compensation that mirrors TEAMS teacher coding for at least 90 days of the school year. So if you're not employed in DeSoto for at least 90 days, you wouldn't be eligible for us to put you up for a designation with the state. And the last is that you have to have at least 10 students per assessment that is tied to your evaluation that have a qualifying growth score. So if we don't have at least 10 students, we're not able to calculate a score for you. For each individual student, there are some criteria that they have to meet as well in order for us to be able to calculate a growth score for them. So the first is that we have to have a beginning and end point to calculate growth. And for all of those, the end point is our end of year assessment, whether it be STAAR or MAP. And then the beginning point is either a beginning of year MAP score or a prior year STAAR data. And that's just going to depend on which assessment we're looking at. So we have to be able to calculate whether or not the student grew. And then we put a few other requirements in place just to ensure that it's a student that you had for most of the year and you were able to affect that student's growth throughout the year. So we're saying that the student has to be enrolled both on the PEAM snapshot date and enrolled in your class on the PEAM snapshot date and be enrolled in your class at the beginning of that end of year testing window, whether it be MAP or for STAAR. And then in addition, the student would need to be in attendance for at least 80% of the days from the day they enrolled until the beginning of the start of that end of year testing window. So if
And I'll just jump in real quick on this, Josh. I think the important thing for teachers to know is that for students to qualify, we want you to have actually had the ability to impact and grow them in this process. We don't want them counting against you if you haven't had that ability. And so the way that it's being defined that way is that they've been in your class for the majority of the year, from the PEEM snapshot date, at least through the testing window, and that they've been coming to class at least 80% of the time. So that's a little bit of the reasoning for that.
And we also just want to talk a little about what is the eligibility for qualifying for a designation. So there are 3 factors that are going to be included in our system. The first is your T-TESS observation. That's going to be exactly the same as it's been in recent years. It'll be conducted by your evaluator on campus. There's also a student growth component, and we'll be using STAAR and or MAP data, just depending on if you have one or both. And then the final element is a Panorama student experience survey. We'll be using this for teachers of students in grades 3 through 12. Panorama doesn't start those surveys until grade 3. So if you're a teacher in 2nd grade and you only have students in 2nd grade or lower, Panorama just won't be a factor in your overall evaluation to determine if we are going to be able to recommend you for a designation. There are 2 requirements that TEA has in place for us to be able to put you up for a designation. The first is that your domain 2 and 3 average on T-TESS has to be at least a 3.7 out of 5. And you also have to be scored at least proficient on each indicator in domain 2 and 3. The student growth component that you're required to meet by TEA to be eligible for a designation is at least 55% of your students meet or exceed their growth targets on STAAR or MAP, depending on which assessment we're using in your case. I'm going to turn it over to Ben for how we'll determine those designations.
Yep, and I'd like to just pause for a second and give people the opportunity to either come off a mute and ask any questions, or go ahead and type it in the Q&A at the bottom if anyone has any questions before we get on to how you're going to actually get scored and determined on this to see if you are eligible. So I'll pause. If anyone wants to come off mute, raise your hand or type it in the Q&A box. We can try to get to you. All right, I see Miss Moore, you have your hand raised. You can come off mute.
We've done the Panorama each year. Like, I've been in the district for 5 years, and I have not once ever received my scores from student feedback.
Right. So in the past, we have not done a teacher-specific Panorama. So for the last 3 years, I believe 4 years we've had it, most of it has been district. Last year was the first year that students were able to and gave feedback directly to individual teachers. You should have had access to that, and you should be able to see that. And if you haven't been able to log into Panorama and see that, we can definitely get you connected and make sure that you're able to log in and see that.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Other questions here? You can type them or raise your hand and come off mute. All right, then we can keep going. Josh, let's dig into how the designation will be determined. And this is where you will be able to see yourself in this. So we've got 2 categories of teachers. The first one is category A. And these are all of our kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers who teach core subjects in reading and or math. I believe most, if not all, of our K2 teachers are self-contained and therefore teach both of those. But there may be some instances where someone is just teaching English. If this is you, your evaluation here is made up of 2 components for this T.I.A. system. The teacher observation, or T-TESS, that's going to count for 45% of the total score. And then the student growth in NWEA MAP, both reading and math. So students, if they take both of those, you'll get a reading score and a math score, and all of that together will make up the 55%. So that's how the scores, and we'll dig into the scores and actually how it'll be calculated shortly. But those are the 2 components that will count for identifying teachers to be put up for designations from kindergarten through second grade, these category A teachers. You go to the next one, Josh. Everybody else is a category B teacher, which is 3rd through 12th grade core teachers in specific subjects. And there are 5 different types that you might fall into. But regardless of which type, which we'll dig into shortly, your TIA aspect is comprised of 3 components. So the first is T-TESS, 45%, the exact same way as category A teachers. 40% of the points come from MAP and or STAAR, depending on what course you teach. And then 15% comes from those Panorama student experience surveys that are directly related to your classroom. So let's jump into the individual types. Type 2 teachers are those teachers who teach courses that have both a STAAR exam and a MAP exam. So who is this? This is usually departmentalized 3rd through 8th grade math and English teachers. If you teach 7th grade English or 6th grade math. This is 8th grade science teachers. And these are our high school Algebra 1, English 1, or English 2 teachers. Everyone in this category, your students take MAP at the beginning and the end of the year for growth, and you have a STAAR exam. And so the way that your points will be broken down for the TIA system was 45% T-TESS, teacher observation, 15% student survey, and then your 40% for student growth is broken down into 20% MAP and 20% STAAR. You go to the next one, Josh. Type 3 teachers are those whose classes do not have a MAP exam, but they do have STAAR. And so who is this? This is departmentalized 8th grade social studies. This is high school biology and high school US history teachers. So yours is the 45% teacher observation, the 15% student survey, and 40% growth is all based on STAAR because there is no MAP testing. If you go to the next one. Type 4 is that same thing, but just for the courses that don't have STAAR, but do have MAP. So in this case, this is English 3, English 4, Algebra 2, and Geometry teachers. You have 45% teacher observation, 15% surveys, and your 40% is based on MAP because you don't have a STAAR exam. And then finally, probably the most confusing one is type 5 teachers. And these are teachers, and there's not many of you, but there are a few who teach multiple types of courses. So for instance, if you are a high school teacher and you teach 4 sections of Algebra 1, which has both STAAR and MAP, that's a type 2 teacher. And you teach 3 sections of Algebra 2, which doesn't have STAAR, but it does have MAP. What we would do is we would calculate each of those separately. The 40% for student growth is still the same. But then after we calculate both of those separately, we would weight them and they would be averaged based on the number of students that you teach. So if 60% of your students are in Algebra 1, that score will count for 60% of your 40% student growth. And then the others will count for 40%. But again, that's not a lot of people. And for all of these, based on your scores for T-TESS, student growth, and or student perception, you can get up to 100 points. Now, this shows how it's broken down. So if you're our type 1 teachers, our pre-K through second grade teachers who qualify, 45 of your points can come from T-TESS, 55% of your points come from growth, and you don't have student perception. So that is 100 points total. And for all of our 3rd through 12th qualifying teachers, 45% for T-TESS, 40% for student growth, 15% for the Panorama survey for 100 total. And based on the number of points that you qualify for, so you might earn 40% in 40 points out of the 45 in T-TESS and 34 in student growth and 9 in student perception. Based on that number, if you have this threshold of points, after this year is all said and done, we will put you up for that designation. So any of our kindergarten through second grade teachers who earn a total of 65 points and meet the state requirements that Josh talked about would be put up for a recognized designation. If you're over 69, you'd be put up for an exemplary designation. And if you've 80 or above, you'd be put up for a master designation. Same thing for types 2 through 5. It's slightly different. If you earn 67 or more, you're recognized. 72 would be exemplary and 84 would be master. So that's how the points will be calculated. It is a little heavy trying to get through the calculations there. But we will have, and as of next Wednesday, when our next one of these is, we will release a guidebook that will walk you through every single bit and calculation that Josh is going to do shortly, and these will always be available to you. But again, all of this is in addition to your regular salary and your other bonuses. Okay, let us pause there again. I want to give, that was a lot of stuff. I do want to give people the option to be able to ask any questions that they have. So feel free to come off of mute, raise your hand, or type it in the Q&A. And I do see people using that. All right, and I do see, and I'm gonna read the two that are in the, we do have two questions come and says, this year will apply to next year if we stay in the district. Correct. And so the short answer to that is yes, your data from this year will be brought in, will be understood, and then in future years, you would get your payout for that next year, although there's a slight delay between this year and the payout because of some things that T.I.A. has to do. And we've got another question that says, this is my first year being a reading interventionist and 2 years in the district. Will I be eligible? So if you meet the criteria and you are the teacher of record for at least those 10 kids in all of your qualifying tests, you would be eligible. Now, I know we do have currently some interventionists or master teachers who are teacher of record and eventually might move out into a fully circulating role where they're not teacher of record. If that's the case, you will no longer be eligible. All right, Josh, take it away.
So we want to go through just a real quick overview of how points will be calculated in each of these areas and to show you an example so you can have an idea of where your score will come from. So the first thing we want to look at is the T-TESS calculation, and this applies to all teachers. So we're going to look at your T-TESS score on your summative score at the end of the year, and it's going to be a weighted average where domains 1 and 4 are weighted as 15%. And domains 2 and 3 are weighted as 35%. Those domain 2 and 3 are weighted higher because those are about what's happening every day in the classroom, right? And those are the domains that we're looking at to say that this is what's happening with kids in front of with you every single day. So those have a higher weight, and we'll translate that into a raw score. And then that raw score gets converted into a T-TESS component score using a conversion table. And this conversion table is going to be published in the field guide that is released next week. So you'll know starting next week, like what is that T-TESS score you need to get different points. Just a quick example. So this is a teacher. We've just made up some numbers for their overall score in domains 1 through 4. We've then gone ahead and weighted them appropriately to get a total score weight for each of those domains. And then we've added those all up and rounded to the nearest tenth to get that this teacher's T-TESS raw score is a 17.6. And then on our conversion chart, that gets converted to 29.5 out of 45 points. So just a quick example of what a conversion chart looks like. We've got all of our ranges for our T-TESS scores, and you figure out which range you fall into, and then it tells you what your T-TESS component score would be. So this teacher at a 17.6 falls on this range of 17.5 to 17.9, and that's where that 29.5 points comes from.
And all of these will be published in the manual on Wednesday, so you will be able to look at it and see in advance. And they're not going to change this year. So it's known from the start. You'll know exactly what scores will get what in each of them.
So for student growth, this also applies to all teachers. And here we're going to be looking at the percentage of your students that either met or exceeded their growth target on the assessments that apply to you. So that might be MAP or STAAR or both. But if a kid met or exceeded their growth target, they'll be counted as a yes. And once again, we have a conversion table that tells us if you are anywhere between 0% of your students up to 100% of your students, that gets converted over to a 5-point scale. And then that 5-point scale is scaled up to the appropriate number for your pie chart. So those pie charts that Ben looked at earlier, we saw that you either got 20 points, 40 points, or 55 points for different assessments. So we would multiply the 5-point scale by 4, 8, or 11 respectively to get you up to those full amounts on the pie chart. So an example of what that might look like is, here's a student growth example for a biology teacher. So that's a type 3 teacher because all they have is STAAR data. So for this teacher, 55.73% of their students met or exceeded their growth target. That was rounded up to 56%. And then in our conversion table, that 56% represents a 3.12 out of 5 for their on their 5-point scale. Since for this teacher, STAAR is worth 40 points, we multiply by 8, right? 5 times 8 gets us up to 40. So we multiply that 3.12 times 8, which gives them 24.96 is their scaled score or their composite score for their student growth component. And then finally, we do a similar calculation for Panorama. So there are 5 categories on the Panorama survey that students are asked questions about on the experience survey. We'll take the average of the positive responses in each of those 5 categories. And then that will give us an overall positive percentage. That is then, once again, we use a table to convert. And like Ben said, these tables are going to be released next week. So you'll know what percentage of positive responses you need to earn the different points on the table. So this is just an example. You can see here are the 5 overall survey topics. We calculated an average for the total percent positive, just by taking the average of those 5 numbers for each category, rounded that up to 75.2. And then based on the conversion table, that 75.2% positive gets us 12 out of 15 points. I know that was a lot of math, so we can pause once again if people want to raise their hand or ask a question in the Q&A. We can go back and look at an example as well, if that would be helpful.
All right, well, feel free. Oh, we good. We got a question in the chat here. Can we go back to the last slide, Josh? So we'll wait here. We got another one that says, I received a state designation last year in a different school district. I am new to DeSoto ISD and my certification does show me as recognized. Will I still qualify for this incentive in this school district since I will hold this recognition for the next 4 years? The answer to that is yes. If you are in a qualified teaching role, so it means if we send to the state and you are teaching and you have the course load of kids that qualifies you as a teacher, you would earn that and you would just automatically fall into this range. So if you get approved, the state is going to send us the qualifying amount for you. You will get 90% of that passed through directly to you when we receive it. So you're already actually in and qualified. You will still get scores in our system because our system is a little bit different. And you're never going to go back on yours. You'll stay recognized. But if in our system, you happen to qualify for an exemplary spot, we would then submit you for that heightened designation. And if you were to receive that, you would have that designation for the next 5 years. But if you bring a designation here, you will receive this for that designation. All right, we're going to make sure that this PowerPoint is available to all of you as well, so you can look through it and then ask us any questions at all. If we can go to the timeline real quick, which I'll walk us through. So here's the timeline. Because DeSoto this is our first year doing this, we're in what's called a data capture year. It means we have already planned out the system. TEA said that system works. We think it makes sense. And this year we're collecting this data. We are looking at the beginning of the year map and the end of the year map. We're going to be comparing the STAAR scores. We'll be looking at the Panorama data and doing the same calculations on T-TESS. And at the end of this year, we're going to do this math. We're going to say, here is our math for it all. Here are the teachers in our system that we want to put up for master teacher, recognized teacher, and exemplary teacher. And we have to submit that to Texas Tech in November of 2022. Texas Tech is working for TEA, and they look at all of the data in the system and make sure that it is valid and reliable data. They spend November through December or January doing that. And then in February, we receive notification, DeSoto ISD, that our system was approved or if it was denied for some reason. If our system is approved, which we fully expect it to be, you would, in that April 23rd, you would receive notification that you have been designated for that designation that would go on your certificate, et cetera. And then the state, after that point in April 23, would send out the payout to DeSoto ISD, and we would pass it directly through to the teacher, that 90%, which is the most that can be done, by August of 2023. Now, that does seem like a long time, and that is only because that this is the first year that DeSoto ISD is doing this. But after that point, every other payout would happen after the school year concludes. That would happen that following August or September. And so that's just going to be on a cycle. And all of this is, again, in total addition to your regular base salary, the retention and recruitment stipend, and any other stipends and extra duty pay you might receive. So all of this is in addition to that. So we're also going to continue to look at ways. Right now, our system only includes those who we were able to qualify under this, which is mostly our core subjects, but not even all of our core subjects. In future years, so next year and beyond, we are going to look to add as many teacher categories as we can to this. So things like CTE, fine arts, a lot of these other ones that are not currently in our system, it's our goal to add those so all teachers can benefit from this as we go forward. So with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Again, we are going to you'll have access to this recording. We'll send this PowerPoint out as well. And next Wednesday, you'll have access to the full guidebook that walks through all of this and how things are calculated. We also are going to have an email, TIA at desotoisd.org, which is not online yet, but will be online as of tomorrow once the midnight hits, that you can email all of your questions to. If you've got questions or want to talk about any of these, we'd be happy to work with you through it. And like, as Ms. Moore had asked earlier about the Panorama data, like we're going to be able to get directly to Ms. Moore and make sure that you can access that and send out all the other information. So with that, I'll pause. Any questions, people raise your hand, come off mute, type it in the Q&A. We just wanted to give you an overview of what's coming and how this may benefit you and how you'll qualify for it. So feel free to stay on and ask questions. If you've got all you need or you want to just think about it and then come back with us more questions, feel free. That brings us to the end of our seminar here. So always available to answer questions, though. We'll hang on for about 5 more minutes and just answer any questions. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the evening.